Hello, brothers and sisters. Every morning when we open our eyes, we are given a brand new opportunity, a fresh start. But here's the thing. Most people don't realize that the first words we say to ourselves in the morning can define the entire day ahead. It's not the emails, not the notifications, not even the plans on our calendar that shape our mindset. It's the dialogue we create in our own heads. Great leaders, great achievers, great dreamers, they don't just leave their mornings to chance. They program their minds with intention. And today, I want to share with you 4 powerful things you can tell yourself every morning. 4 sentences so simple, yet so profound that they have the power to shift your focus, strengthen your confidence, and remind you of your purpose. The words we tell ourselves shape the way we see the world. It sounds simple, almost too simple to be true, but if you pause and think about it, you'll realize it's one of the most powerful truths of human behavior. Every thought, every phrase, every quiet whisper in our mind acts like a lens. When the lens is clear, we see possibilities. When the lens is cracked, we see only obstacles. And the most fascinating part is that we are the ones choosing which lens we put on every single day, usually without even realizing it. From the moment we wake up, before we even step out of bed, our brain starts searching for meaning. It looks for clues, who we are, what matters, whether today will be good or bad. And the very first words we say to ourselves provide those clues. If the first thing we tell ourselves is, this is going to be a stressful day, guess what? We start scanning the world for evidence that it will, in fact, be stressful. If we wake up and think, I'm already behind, the day feels like a race we can never win. But if we tell ourselves, today is a new chance, or I am capable of handling what comes, the same exact day unfolds with an entirely different emotional texture. The difference isn't in the events. The difference is in the story we told ourselves first. What's remarkable is that human beings are meaning-making machines. Our brains are wired to take raw information and assign it a story. 2 people can face the exact same situation. One sees opportunity, the other sees disaster. And more often than not, the difference isn't the situation, it's the self-talk. Think about it. When someone says, I can't do this, their brain immediately starts scanning for reasons to justify that belief. They'll notice every mistake, every weakness, every challenge. But when someone says, I will figure this out, the brain goes hunting for possibilities, solutions, and allies. The words act like a compass, pointing us in a direction long before we've taken a single step. This is why the words we tell ourselves matter so deeply. They are not just empty phrases. They are instructions to the subconscious mind. When you say, I'm not good enough, you are giving your brain a task, find proof that I'm not enough. And your brain, being the efficient machine it is, will happily comply. But when you say, I can grow, I can learn, I can get better, suddenly the brain shifts its job description. Now it looks for ways to help you grow, for lessons in failure, for opportunities in disguise. The exact same person, the exact same day, but a completely different experience because of different words. Leaders understand this intuitively, even if they don't always articulate it. When you hear a great leader speak, notice how intentional they are with language. They don't just describe problems, they frame them as challenges. They don't just talk about setbacks, they call them lessons. And if they do this out loud for others, imagine what they're saying silently to themselves. Before they step on stage, before they walk into a meeting, before they make a tough call, they remind themselves of the story that will allow them to lead with clarity, because they know if their self-talk is poisoned, everything they touch will carry that poison. If their self-talk is empowering, everything they touch will carry that energy. Now, some people dismiss self-talk as cliché, as if it's just repeating cheesy lines in the mirror. But this isn't about ego or fake positivity. It's about training the mind to notice what is possible. It's about creating alignment between the story in your head and the actions in your life. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are malleable. They adapt to what we repeatedly tell them. If you tell yourself every morning, I am always tired, your body listens. If you tell yourself, I can find energy, your body responds differently. The science is clear. Words literally rewire the brain through repetition. The greatest danger is that most of our self-talk is unconscious. We don't even realize the script we're running. Think about how often people say to themselves, I'm terrible at this, or I'll never change, or I don't deserve it. These phrases are repeated so often they become identity, not just opinion. And when something becomes identity, it is far harder to change. But the good news is that the opposite is also true. When you start feeding yourself phrases like, I am capable, or I have value, or I can improve, those two over time become identity. They become part of how you see yourself and therefore how you see the world. Children give us the purest example of this. Watch a child who is encouraged, who is told, "You can do it, keep trying." Their eyes light up, they believe it, and they push a little further. Now watch a child who is told, "You're clumsy, you'll never get it." They retreat, they hesitate, they stop before they even start. And yet, as adults, we forget that we are still those children on the inside. We still respond to the voice that speaks to us most often, the voice inside our own head. If it's kind, we grow. If it's cruel, we shrink. That's why the words we tell ourselves are not just casual thoughts. They are blueprints. They don't just describe our reality, they create it. Every morning when we speak to ourselves, we are planting seeds. Some seeds grow into fear, doubt, and hesitation. Others grow into courage, clarity, and resilience. The garden we live in tomorrow is a reflection of the words we plant today. And the choice of which words to plant is always, always ours. Morning self-talk sets the emotional tone for the entire day. The first few moments after we wake up are far more powerful than most of us realize. They act like a spark that ignites the fire of our emotions, our mindset, and even our behavior. The brain, when it wakes, is in a highly suggestible state. The conscious mind is not yet fully distracted by noise, notifications, or the demands of the day. It's almost as if the mind is waiting for instructions, asking us, "How should I see the world today?" And the words we choose in that fragile space give the answer. If those words are full of stress, doubt, or negativity, that is the lens the brain will use to filter the rest of the day. If those words are full of intention, possibility, and strength, the entire day takes on a different meaning. Think about it this way: emotions are contagious, not just to others, but to ourselves. A single anxious thought in the morning can create a ripple effect, coloring every conversation and every choice we make. If the first thing you tell yourself is, "I don't have enough time," you carry urgency and panic into every meeting, every task, every interaction. If instead you begin with, "I will use the time I have wisely," you shift into a place of focus and calm. The external circumstances may be identical, but the emotional atmosphere is transformed by the tone set in the first moments of the morning. Science backs this up. When we start the day with stress-driven self-talk, the brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone, which narrows our focus and prepares us for threat. That might be helpful if we were running from danger, but in daily life it makes us reactive, impatient, and easily frustrated. On the other hand, positive, empowering self-talk releases dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters that lift mood, increase creativity, and improve problem solving. The difference between a day where we feel trapped and a day where we feel in control is often a matter of chemistry, and the chemistry begins with the words we choose to say to ourselves. Leaders often model this principle without even naming it. A great leader knows that the tone they set at the beginning of a day, a meeting, or even a conversation influences how others feel and respond. The same is true for self-leadership. If we begin the day with self-talk rooted in fear, we carry that fear into the world, and it shows up in our decisions. If we begin with confidence and clarity, we project those qualities in everything we do. That's why the practice of morning self-talk is not a trivial ritual. It's the foundation of emotional leadership over ourselves. Most people underestimate the cumulative effect of this practice. One morning of negative self-talk may not ruin a life, but day after day, it builds a pattern. Slowly, it convinces us that the world is hostile, that we are not enough, that life is too overwhelming. It becomes the default setting. And once it becomes default, it feels like reality. But in truth, it's not reality, it's conditioning. Likewise, one morning of intentional, empowering self-talk may not transform everything overnight, but repeated consistently, it reshapes our emotional patterns. Over time, we start to see the world through a lens of possibility instead of fear. The most interesting part is how subtle the shift can be. Imagine two people waking up on the same day. One tells themselves, "I can't handle what's ahead." The other says, "I will learn something valuable from whatever happens today." Both face identical challenges, traffic deadlines, disagreements. But one experiences the day as a burden, while the other experiences it as an opportunity for growth. Their external circumstances are the same, but their internal emotional tone could not be more different. And that tone was set in the first few minutes of the morning. It's important to realize that self-talk is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's a quiet whisper we barely notice, a subtle phrase that slips through our mind as we reach for the alarm clock. "I'm so tired. This is going to be hard. I don't want to do this." These words may feel harmless, but repeated over weeks and months, they carve grooves in the brain, grooves that dictate our emotional defaults. On the other hand, replacing those quiet phrases with, "I am grateful for another day," or "I am ready to face what comes," begins to carve new grooves. It's like tuning an instrument. The first note you strike sets the key for the entire song. Children again show us this truth in a simple way. A child who wakes up hearing, "You're strong, you're loved, you can do this," begins their day with confidence. A child who hears, "Hurry up, you're always late, you never do things right," begins their day with anxiety. As adults, we may no longer hear those words from others, but we continue the habit of repeating them to ourselves. We become our own encourager or our own critic, and whichever role we choose sets the emotional tone for how the day unfolds. The challenge, then, is awareness. To notice the first words that come out of our mouth or pass through our mind each morning. To pause and ask ourselves, is this the tone I want to carry with me today? Because whether we recognize it or not, that first tone becomes the soundtrack for everything else. When we are intentional about choosing words of strength, gratitude, or clarity, we begin the day in harmony. When we neglect it, we risk playing the entire day out of tune. Great leaders begin with intentional mindset, not accidental motivation. This is one of those truths that separates people who drift through life from those who shape it. Too many of us wait for motivation to appear as if it were some mysterious visitor that shows up at random. We wake up and say, "I hope today I feel inspired," or "I hope something motivates me." But hope is not a strategy, and motivation is not something to be chased. Motivation is fleeting. It rises and falls with mood, weather, circumstances, and energy levels. An intentional mindset, on the other hand, is chosen, it is built, it is reinforced every single morning. The difference may sound small, but is profound. When someone relies on accidental motivation, their progress depends on how they feel. If they feel energized, they move forward. If they feel tired, discouraged, or distracted, they stop. Their consistency disappears because their emotions dictate their actions. But when someone operates from an intentional mindset, they move regardless of how they feel. They don't wait to feel ready. They decide to show up because their mindset is anchored in something bigger than the emotion of the moment. That is why leaders, innovators, and achievers seem unstoppable. It's not because they never feel doubt or fatigue. It's because their intentional mindset allows them to act in spite of it. An intentional mindset starts with clarity. Leaders begin by asking, "Why am I doing this? What I stand for, what matters most?" That clarity becomes their compass. Without it, the day pulls them in every direction, driven by distractions, demands, and other people's priorities. With it, they have a filter. They can look at every situation and decide whether it aligns with their purpose. The average person waits for motivation to push them forward. The leader uses intention to pull them in the right direction. One is reactive, the other is proactive. Consider the morning routine of someone who leads intentionally. They don't wake up and immediately dive into messages, notifications, and tasks. They first align their mind. They might reflect on gratitude, visualize their goals, or affirm their ability to handle challenges. These practices are not random. They are deliberate choices to program the brain with a story that serves them. They know that if they don't choose their mindset, the world will choose it for them. And the world rarely chooses in your favor. What makes intentional mindset so powerful is that it multiplies over time. One day of intentional thought may feel small, but repeated every morning, it reshapes how you interpret reality. Instead of waiting for good days, you create them. Instead of hoping to feel strong, you remind yourself that strength is already within you. Instead of depending on external events for motivation, you depend on your own inner clarity. That consistency builds trust with yourself. You begin to believe, no matter what happens, I know I will show up with intention. And that belief becomes unshakable. Accidental motivation, in contrast, weakens trust in yourself. When you only move forward on days you feel like it, you reinforce the idea that you are at the mercy of your moods. You tell yourself, I can't rely on me, I need something external to inspire me. Over time, this dependence makes progress fragile. You're waiting for the perfect conditions before you act, and because perfect conditions rarely exist, you remain stuck. Intentional mindset breaks this cycle. It says, I will decide the conditions internally and then act accordingly. Leaders throughout history have modeled this principle. Think of great explorers, activists, and visionaries. They didn't wake up each day feeling motivated to endure hardship, uncertainty, or sacrifice. What drove them forward was intention. They had decided in advance what they stood for, and that decision carried them through the moments When motivation was nowhere to be found, their actions were not fueled by fleeting energy, they were fueled by chosen commitment. And that is why their influence endured. Even in everyday life, the same truth applies. A parent who wakes up with the intention to love and guide their children will act differently than one who simply hopes they feel patient. An entrepreneur who starts the day with the intention to serve customers will approach challenges differently than one who only feels motivated when sales are good. A student who chooses the mindset of growth will push through struggles, while one who waits for inspiration may give up too soon. In every case, intention is the anchor that allows progress to continue. The mind is a powerful tool, but it needs direction. Left on its own, it drifts toward fear, doubt, and distraction. Given intention, it becomes focused, resilient, and creative. The choice happens in the morning when the slate is clean and the direction of the day is still undecided. That's why great leaders don't leave it to chance. They know that mindset is not a reaction, it's a design. And when you design it intentionally, you no longer live at the mercy of motivation. You live at the command of purpose. Affirmations aren't about ego, they're about clarity and direction. Too often when people hear the word affirmation, they imagine standing in front of a mirror, shouting exaggerated statements about how great they are, almost as if they're trying to convince themselves of something they don't believe. And because of that image, many dismiss affirmations as shallow or self-indulgent. But the real purpose of affirmations is far deeper. They are not about inflating the ego, they are about programming the mind with the right focus, reminding ourselves of who we want to be, and giving direction to our actions before the day begins. Every one of us has a constant stream of thoughts running through our heads. Psychologists estimate that we think tens of thousands of thoughts every day, and many of those thoughts repeat from yesterday. Left unmanaged, that stream often defaults to doubt, worry, and fear. Affirmations are a way of interrupting that loop and choosing a different narrative. They are statements of intention that guide the mind toward clarity. When someone begins the day saying, "I am capable of handling challenges," they are not bragging. They are simply aligning their mind with the truth that will serve them best. It is not about being better than others. It is about being prepared to bring the best of yourself to the day ahead. The ego shouts, "I am special, I am better, I deserve." Affirmations in their true form whisper something different. "I am ready, I am learning, I am becoming." That difference is subtle but profound. Ego isolates us from others. Affirmations connect us to our purpose. Ego demands recognition. Affirmations inspire action. Ego feeds on comparison. Affirmations fuel growth. This is why great leaders use affirmations not as a tool of arrogance, but as a compass. They understand that if their mind is not clear on where to go, they will drift. And drifting rarely leads anywhere meaningful. Affirmations provide a sense of direction the same way a lighthouse provides guidance to ships in the dark. Without that light, the ship wanders aimlessly, vulnerable to rocks and storms. With it, the ship knows where to head, even if the journey is long. Each morning when we affirm certain truths, we are lighting that beacon for ourselves. We are saying, "This is the direction I will move in today, no matter what distractions or challenges I face." The words are not magic spells, they are intentional reminders. Think of how athletes use affirmations before a competition. They don't say, "I hope I feel motivated." They repeat phrases like, "I am strong, I am focused, I am ready." These words are not about bragging, they are about bringing clarity to the mind and body. They quiet doubt and channel energy toward performance. In the same way, leaders, teachers, parents, and everyday individuals can use affirmations to remind themselves of the qualities they want to embody. By saying, "I lead with empathy," or "I am patient under pressure," they anchor their behavior in clarity, not accident. What makes affirmations powerful is the way they influence not just emotions, but also actions. When you affirm something consistently, your brain begins to search for ways to make it true. This is a psychological principle known as the reticular activating system. The brain pays more attention to the information that aligns with what you repeatedly tell it. For example, if you keep affirming, "I am learning every day," you become more aware of lessons hidden in ordinary experiences. If you affirm, "I am calm in challenges," you notice opportunities to practice composure where before you might have reacted impulsively. The affirmation does not create instant change, but it shifts attention, and attention shapes behavior. Another important distinction is that affirmations must be rooted in possibility, not fantasy. Telling yourself something completely disconnected from reality often backfires. If someone says, "I am perfect and flawless," their mind rejects it because it knows it isn't true. But if they say, "I am capable of improving every day," The mind accepts it as believable and actionable. The goal of affirmations is not to deny reality, but to direct it. They bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to go by reminding you of the path forward. Affirmations also serve as a shield against the negative voices around us. Every day, we are surrounded by messages telling us we are not enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, not smart enough. If we don't have a counter voice, we begin to absorb those narratives as truth. Affirmations give us that counter voice. They remind us, I am worthy of respect. I bring value. I have purpose. These statements are not arrogance, they are protection. They are the anchors that prevent us from drifting into the currents of doubt created by the outside world. Consider a leader walking into a high-stakes meeting. If their self-talk is dominated by ego, they might say, I need to prove I am the smartest in the room. That will drive them to dominate conversations and ignore others. If their self-talk is shaped by affirmations, they might say, I will listen deeply and add value. That creates an entirely different dynamic. One builds walls, the other builds bridges. One is rooted in insecurity disguised as strength. The other is rooted in clarity expressed as service. At its core, affirmation is a daily reminder of choice. It is the choice to decide what kind of person you want to be before the world decides for you. It is the choice to align your thoughts with your purpose rather than your fears. It is the choice to guide your energy towards something meaningful instead of letting it scatter. When practiced consistently, affirmations shift from words you say to truths you live. They stop being external declarations and start becoming part of your internal identity. And once they become identity, they no longer require effort. They simply flow into the way you think, the way you act, and the way you lead. What we repeat daily becomes what we believe. Human beings are creatures of repetition, and the stories we tell ourselves again and again slowly hardwire themselves into our identity. At first, they might feel like harmless thoughts or casual phrases. But over time, the repetition of those words gives them power. They move from being something we say to something we assume to something we live by. And the remarkable thing is that it doesn't matter whether what we repeat is true or false. If we tell ourselves the same thing often enough, our brain accepts it as reality. Think about how advertising works. A message shown repeatedly begins to stick, even if at first it was just noise in the background. The same is true for self-talk. The brain is not designed to question every thought. It is designed to conserve energy by creating shortcuts. So, when we repeat a phrase daily, our brain treats it like a shortcut, like a mental script to follow. If the phrase is, I am not good enough, that becomes the default. If the phrase is, I can handle challenges, that becomes the default. The repetition makes the difference, not the initial emotion. This is why daily self-talk is so important. A single positive thought might make us feel better for a moment, but it is repetition that transforms identity. When we wake up every morning and remind ourselves, I am capable, those words begin to take root. At first, they may feel forced. At first, doubt may argue back. But the more consistently we repeat them, the stronger they become. The brain slowly rewires itself to see capability not as a possibility, but as a fact. Over time, we stop debating with the words, and we start living as if they were true. The same is true for negative repetition. People who constantly tell themselves, I can't do this, don't just describe their situation, they reinforce it. With every repetition, the belief grows heavier. Eventually, it becomes so ingrained that even when they are capable, they don't try. The words have become a prison, built brick by brick through repetition. What makes it dangerous is how invisible the process is. We rarely notice the power of repetition until it has already shaped who we are. Leaders understand the importance of repetition in belief building. This is why they repeat core values, visions, and purposes over and over again, even when it sounds redundant. They know that belief is not created by hearing something once. It is created by hearing it consistently until it becomes part of the group's identity. The same principle applies to self-leadership. The beliefs we carry about ourselves are not created in a single moment of inspiration or despair. They are crafted by the words we choose to repeat every day. Imagine two people preparing for the same challenge. One wakes up each morning repeating, I am going to fail, I'm not ready, I don't have what it takes. The other wakes up repeating, I am learning, I'm growing, I will find a way. After a week, the difference might be small. After a month, the difference is noticeable. After a year, the gap between them is massive. One has built a habit of fear, the other has built a habit of resilience. The repetition created a trajectory, and that trajectory became their reality. The brain has a feature called neuroplasticity, which means it adapts to the patterns we feed it. Repeated thoughts strengthen certain neural pathways while weakening others. This means the phrases we say to ourselves every day are literally sculpting the structure of our brain. The more often we repeat a certain belief, the more automatic it becomes. That is why habits of thought are so hard to break. They are not just ideas, they are physical patterns in the brain. And the only way to replace them is with new repetition, new patterns, new daily words. Children again show us this principle clearly. A child who hears encouragement daily begins to believe in their own potential. A child who hears criticism daily begins to believe they are flawed or unworthy. The repetition of those messages doesn't just influence behavior, it shapes identity. And as adults, we continue to be shaped the same way, except now the voice repeating the messages most often is our own. When we criticize ourselves daily, we reinforce weakness. When we encourage ourselves daily, we reinforce strength. It's important to recognize that repetition doesn't have to be dramatic. Even small, subtle phrases repeated daily add up. Saying, "I'll never change," every morning might not feel like much in the moment, but over years it creates resignation. Saying, "I can grow," every morning might feel small, but over years, it creates momentum. Belief is not built in bursts, it is built in layers, stacked one on top of the other through daily repetition. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Shouting positive words once in a while is not as effective as quietly reminding yourself every day of who you want to be. The daily rhythm of repetition is what transforms a phrase into a belief and a belief into a way of life. Each word is like a drop of water. One drop does little, but thousands of drops over time carve valleys into stone. In the same way, daily words carve the pathways of our mind. What we repeat daily becomes what we believe, and what we believe shapes every choice we make. That is why the small, seemingly insignificant act of choosing the right words each morning carries such weight. It is not just about feeling good in the moment. It is about constructing the foundation of identity, one repetition at a time. Every belief we hold, every layer of confidence we build, and every limitation we eventually break free from is not the result of a single event, but the accumulation of tiny, consistent messages we tell ourselves over time. Human beings are wired to adapt to repetition. What we hear again and again, what we reinforce daily, begins to etch itself into the architecture of our minds. Think about it. Every cultural norm, every societal belief, every personal value you carry has, at some level, been repeated so often that it became part of your truth. And the same is true with the things we say to ourselves in the quiet of the morning. Small, intentional self-messages may feel insignificant in the moment, but with consistency, they transform into the confidence that guides us through the storms of life. Imagine a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble. With every small strike, the shape begins to emerge. One strike alone changes nothing, but thousands of strikes over time bring forth a masterpiece. That is exactly how self-talk works. The single affirmation you say today may not feel life-changing, but repeated every day, it begins to reframe the way you see yourself. When you tell yourself, "I am capable," every morning, you start to notice opportunities instead of obstacles. When you repeat, "I am worthy," you slowly disarm the self-doubt that has lived inside you for years. These micro-messages are like the gentle strikes of the sculptor's hammer. They don't demand immediate change, but they promise transformation over time. The human brain does not always distinguish between external voices and internal ones. If the world tells you over and over again that you are not enough, your mind will eventually believe it. If you tell yourself every day that you are not ready, you will start to hesitate even when you are fully prepared. But the opposite is also true. When you feed your brain with affirmations of strength, resilience, and worth, it starts to align with that reality. Confidence is not born out of one grand declaration. It is built brick by brick, word by word, day after day. The repetition of these self-messages is what convinces your subconscious mind to stop fighting you and start supporting you. The challenge for most of us is that we underestimate the power of small consistency. We look for breakthroughs, for life-changing events, for something dramatic that will shift the entire course of our lives, but breakthroughs are rarely sudden. They are the visible result of invisible consistency. The leader who walks into a room with unshakable confidence did not build it overnight. It came from years of feeding themselves messages of clarity and purpose every single day. Their calm presence, their strong conviction, their ability to inspire others, all of it was born in the quiet mornings when no one was watching, when they chose to repeat the words that fueled their belief. It is the same with athletes who perform under pressure. They don't rely on the cheer of the crowd to build confidence. They rely on the thousands of times they told themselves they were ready, the countless mornings they reminded themselves of their preparation. The small messages become the foundation on which their performance stands. And the same applies to entrepreneurs, artists, or anyone daring to lead a meaningful life. Confidence is not a gift reserved for the lucky few. It is the outcome of repeated self-messages that align your inner world with the goals you are pursuing. What makes these self-messages so powerful is not just the words themselves, but the consistency with which they are spoken. If you tell yourself once that you are strong, it may encourage you for a moment, but if you tell yourself every morning for a year, your brain begins to rewire itself to believe in that strength. Neuroscience shows us that repetition strengthens neural pathways. The more we repeat a thought, the more natural it becomes until it turns into our default response. That is why confidence that looks unshakable on the outside is actually built on thousands of small, consistent affirmations on the inside. This is not about pretending or tricking yourself. It is about aligning your words with the person you are becoming. If you aspire to be a leader, tell yourself daily that you are capable of leading with empathy and vision. If you want to overcome fear, remind yourself every morning that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Each repetition nudges you closer to that reality until one day, you no longer have to remind yourself. You simply live it. Consistency in self-messages also builds trust with yourself. Just like we trust leaders who show up reliably, we begin to trust ourselves when we show up every morning with the same affirmations. That trust becomes the soil in which confidence grows. And once you trust yourself, you stop seeking validation from the outside world. You stop needing permission to move forward. You stop waiting for someone else to tell you that you are ready. You begin to carry your own authority, built not from arrogance, but from the quiet strength of repeated truth. Small, consistent self-messages are not glamorous. They don't make headlines. They don't look dramatic from the outside, but they are the secret to long-term confidence. They are the invisible practice that builds the visible strength others admire. And they are available to anyone willing to commit to the discipline of repetition. Confidence is not born, it is built. And it is built one morning at a time. Leadership has always been misunderstood as something external, a title we are given, a position we earn, or a role we step into. But the truth is, leadership begins internally, long before anyone else recognizes it. To lead others with authenticity, conviction, and clarity, you must first learn how to lead yourself. And that begins every morning in the quiet moments when no one is watching, when you decide how you will think, what you will believe, and what words you will allow to shape your day. The conversation you have with yourself is the foundation upon which all other leadership is built. If you cannot lead your own thoughts, your own fears, your own doubts, how can you expect to lead others through theirs? When people think of leaders, they often imagine individuals who stand in front of a room, commanding attention, giving direction, and inspiring others with powerful words. But the truth is, those words lose their power if they are not rooted in something deeper. And that deeper foundation is self-leadership. It's the discipline of choosing your mindset, of reminding yourself of your values, and of setting the tone for your actions before you step out into the world. Leaders don't just wake up ready to inspire, they wake up with the responsibility of first inspiring themselves. They do this by speaking with intention, by guiding their own thoughts, the same way they will later guide the thoughts of their team. Every morning, you have a choice. You can allow the day to dictate who you will be, or you can decide who you will be before the day begins. This is why those first words you tell yourself are so powerful. They are not just affirmations, they are acts of leadership. Saying to yourself, I am capable of facing whatever comes my way, is not just self-encouragement, it is self-leadership. It is setting the direction of your own mind so that no matter what challenges arise, you remain anchored in your belief. And when others see that steadiness in you, when they see that you are not easily shaken by circumstances, they begin to trust you. That trust is the foundation of leadership. Leading yourself also means holding yourself accountable. It's easy to make promises to others and feel obligated to follow through, but how often do we break promises we make to ourselves? When you tell yourself every morning that you will show up with courage, with empathy, with focus, you are making a commitment. And every time you honor that commitment, you strengthen your own integrity. Leaders who cannot keep promises to themselves often struggle to gain the respect of others. But leaders who demonstrate self-discipline, who prove to themselves daily that their words and actions align, build a credibility that naturally flows outward. Confidence, vision, and influence are not gifts leaders suddenly acquire when they are handed authority. They are cultivated traits born from the practice of leading yourself consistently. Think of a leader who inspires you. What you admire is not just what they say, but the way they carry themselves, the calmness in their presence, the conviction in their choices. That calmness did not come from a title, it came from countless mornings of guiding their own thoughts, of preparing their own heart, of setting their own direction before leading others. They learned to master their inner world, and as a result, they could influence the outer one. When you lead yourself well, you also model leadership for others. People watch more than they listen. If your words inspire but your actions contradict them, people will follow neither. But if your actions reflect the discipline of self-leadership, if your team sees that you begin each day with clarity, with intentionality, with self-guided purpose, they will be inspired not just by what you say, but by who you are. In this way, self-leadership becomes contagious. Your ability to guide yourself gives others permission to guide themselves, and suddenly you are building a culture of leadership instead of a hierarchy of authority. There is also a deep humility in leading yourself first. It acknowledges that you are not above the struggles your team faces. You too wake up with doubts. You too wrestle with fear. You too question your direction. But instead of ignoring those feelings, you face them head on by speaking truth into them, by reminding yourself of your values, by choosing your mindset before the world chooses it for you. That humility makes you relatable. People don't follow leaders who pretend to be perfect. They follow leaders who show them that imperfection can still move forward with strength. Self-leadership also creates resilience. The world is unpredictable. Circumstances will test you. People will doubt you. Situations will overwhelm you. If your confidence relies solely on external validation, you will crumble when it disappears. But if your confidence is rooted in the words you tell yourself every morning, in the discipline of leading your own mind, then you are prepared to withstand the storms. Leaders are not defined by how they perform when things are easy, but by how they endure when things are difficult. And endurance comes from inner leadership. Leading yourself every morning is not an optional practice. It is the essence of leadership itself. It is where clarity begins. It is where confidence is born. It is where direction is set. And it is where the influence you will later have on others first takes root. Before you ever lead a team, before you ever inspire an audience, before you ever make decisions that affect others, you are faced with the first and most important responsibility of leadership: to lead yourself.